Hi, everybody. Tom Alexander here. This is the FusionShare podcast, and we are excited about today's guest. Let me give you a little backgrounder. You know, Philadelphia has been referred to as Bass Town, and some of the greatest bass players in jazz and contemporary music have come from the city of brotherly love, including Jimmy Garrison, Percy Heath, Nathan East, Stanley Clarke, Jaco Pastorius, Alphonso Johnson, Victor Bailey, Christian McBride. The list goes on and on, including our very special guest on the FusionShare pod today. He is Gerald Veasley, and he has performed with the likes of Grover Washington Jr., special effects, Joe Zawinul, Phillip Bailey, many, many more, and of course has enjoyed a long and diverse solo career. Gerald Veasley joins us. Gerald, welcome.
Thank you, Tom. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, it is great to have you. You know, we were talking ahead of time, and sort of going back home for me because you are in the great city of Philadelphia, and I've certainly spent more than my share of time there playing with a lot of musicians and seeing a lot of ball games. And it's one of my favorite cities on the entire planet. So it's great to reconnect with someone from back home, and you know, you're getting ready to come down here to South Florida for a show, which we're certainly going to be talking about. But, you know, you've been doing this music now for many, many decades. And I believe it was your uncle that kind of got you going in this, in music and kind of kick-started your career, right?
Yeah, very much so. My uncle was a legendary gospel singer, Ira Tucker, and he was a member of the group, the Dixie Hummingbirds, which was a classic with the gospel quartet, although they had more members than four. But they were really significant in the history of gospel. And he was significant in my life because when my dad died, he took me under his wing and gave me employment because at that time he was not only singing, but producing records for a label called TK Records, which I think was based in Florida, right?
Yes.
And
yes, so. Yeah.
They were focused primarily on disco music at that time,
right?
But they decided to launch a gospel division. So my uncle was the producer for that gospel division. So when my dad died, I was at Penn on a whole different track. I wanted to be an attorney, I thought, and I really stopped playing the bass, but played a little bit recreationally. Yeah. And my uncle pulled me aside. He said, you know, I'm your dad now. I'm going to take care of you. And what he meant was he was going to put me to work. So I recorded on 9 albums, 9 full-length albums with union wages.
Wow.
And credits. And that was in a very short period of time. And the significance of that was that it encouraged me that, you know, first of all, I always loved the studio setting so that I could hold my own in the studio, and that it was possible to possibly make a living as a musician.
How about that? Yeah, that is amazing. And yeah, you mentioned TK Records. I believe there's a film coming out on the TK Records soon,
wow.
Actually. I've heard that it's like a documentary. And that's got a great big history. And who knows, maybe your uncle will be mentioned in that. Very quite possible.
Yeah, they should.
Yeah, very, very interesting stuff. And of course, you know, as I mentioned at the top, Philadelphia is just a rich heritage, rich history of bass players. For some reason, that town just can deliver bass players, and you're certainly one of them. And did you find that you know, I mean, maybe not consciously, but maybe subconsciously, that was sort of in your head? It's like, wow, you know, Stanley, Alphonso, Jaco, all these guys that are, you know, Philly guys. I mean, Jaco's formation was more here in South Florida, but he was from Norristown, which is right there outside of the city.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You know, were you kind of aware of that? Were you, or was that something that you know, maybe didn't play into it?
I became aware of it later as a professional musician because I would get asked that question. The question that you asked, like, what is it? Is it something in the water? And what
Right.
is it about this lineage? And I still, after all these years, don't have an answer. But I'm certainly at this stage of my life very proud to have come up and be a part of all those that rich history that you call out. I mean, Stanley, of course, for many of us was an idol,
Yeah.
and he was an idol to me because he was the first bass player that I saw come out of the shadows. When I saw him with Return to Forever, I saw four musicians who were co-equals, as opposed to the bass player that's only in a supportive role with an occasional solo,
Right.
standing in the background, holding it down. He certainly could do all that, but I saw someone who was a force out front and had an identifiable voice and this huge personality that he wasn't reluctant to let show. So that's what inspired me. In addition to his incredible musicianship.
Yeah. Yeah. No question. You some of the earliest work you did, separate of the Dixie Hummingbirds, was Grover Washington Jr. And he had played a real instrumental role, I guess pun intended, in your life, in your musical life, right?
Yeah, I was with Grover for a number of years, and he was just so inspirational or inspiring to not just me, but everyone who was in his presence. I mean, as a musician, I saw someone who had a tremendous work ethic. He took pride in mastering his instrument, but not just when I say instrument singular, it's really plural because anyone who's a Grover Washington fan knows that he excelled on the alto, he excelled on the soprano, he excelled on the tenor. I'd be hard pressed to think of someone who had significant hits on all three instruments. And meanwhile, his first horn was the baritone saxophone. So
Was it?
often,
Oh, I didn't
yeah,
know that. There you
as
go.
a kid, that was what,
Yeah.
I don't know what the story was, but sometimes the baritone saxophone is the one that's left over.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, he was just so relentless in terms of his quest to be the best he could. And the other thing that people may not know about him was that he was really a straight ahead aficionado. I mean, he's known for his smooth jazz or contemporary jazz work, but in many ways, he was just as serious about knowing all of the standards and being able to play the vocabulary and the literature. And he took pride in the fact that if you called a standard, typically he would know it. He couldn't be stumped. And he grew up that way of, having to play in these clubs and bars where, people had very little patience if you didn't know your stuff. It's like, get out of here, kid. Uh, yeah. And the third thing I'll say about him is that he was a gentle person because people, again, if you were in his presence, you were in the presence of someone who was very kind and open and helpful, didn't carry himself around like he was a superstar because he had gold and platinum albums and all of that, but was like, Tom, how are you? Tell me about you. How's your family? How are you doing, man? What are you working on? This kind of person.
Yeah.
But on the bandstand, he was extremely competitive,
Yeah.
very, he wanted to show you what he could do.
Yeah, and he certainly did, and there was a warmth that well, the way you're saying it now and how kind he was and what a wonderful human being he was came through in the music because the music was so warm and it had a soul to it that was not that didn't kind of just happen. That didn't fall off the back of a truck. That was hard to achieve. I mean, a lot of artists, you know, uh, were great technicians and wonderful, but maybe it lacked a little bit of soul and warmth. And it just exuded that. It was all there. And
Yeah,
he was wonderful. And it's interesting. You and I were chatting beforehand before we came on, and we're both big sports fans and both big Philly sports fans. And Grover had a special relationship with the great Julius Erving, Dr. J, who was one of my childhood idols,
I
heroes,
see.
still
Yeah.
is. And what do you know about that relationship?
I don't know a lot. I do know that, as you said, they were friends, and his, in fact, Grover always wanted to be. His other love was basketball because he fancied himself a pretty good basketball player as
Uh,
well. He wasn't blessed with the height, but he loved basketball, and so he
Pretty
wrote a
good athlete,
song.
huh?
Yeah, he wrote a song for Dr. J called "Let It Flow."
Yes.
And I think he admired Dr. J's kind of apparent effortlessness. This is my interpretation. I don't know
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure,
right.
but yeah, like you and I love sports. Grover loves sports, and
Yeah,
yeah.
that's terrific. We're speaking with Gerald Veasley, wonderful composer, bass player from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and he will be here in South Florida. Now, this is you know a global podcast, but we know that South Florida is a destination, particularly in the wintertime. This time of year, as the weather gets cool in other places, people come to South Florida to have a little winter warm up. Although as we're recording this, it's in the 40s today here, but that's only one day. Don't worry about it. The concert that Gerald will be performing will be at a place in Boca Raton called Crazy Uncle Mike's. Crazy Uncle Mike's in Boca Raton. It is located at 6450 North Federal Highway in Boca, and it's a tremendous place to see music, hear music, great food, great drinks. It's just a really cool hang, a great vibe. And he'll be performing with singer Carol Riddick. Two shows, by the way, one at 5:30 and then another at 8 p.m. So yes, you will be back to back like the old days where guys just used to play a couple shows a night, right?
Yeah, and when I grew up, man, you would do 4 or 5 sets of music. You had to have a lot of stamina back in those days.
Yeah, right. You think you think you got it in you for two big shows?
But I'm looking forward to this performance. You know, Carol Riddick, she and I have done a lot of work together over the years, and she's just someone who carries so much emotion in her voice. Is very expressive,
Yeah.
and her range is incredible. I just love her musicianship, but just as much, I love the way that she puts her heart and soul into her artistry. And so we have a great time performing. So you'll hear me doing the funky, crazy bass stuff, and you'll hear, some of my contemporary jazz work. But we'll also feature her on some music that's really heartfelt.
Wonderful. Can't wait for that. Can you uh, tell us a little bit about the rest of the group, the players that'll be with you?
Sure. Our saxophonist, who's been in my band for a number of years, is Carl Cox, and Carl is a recording artist in his own right. He's had several chart-topping singles and an album in recent years. James Biscuit Rouse is the drummer, and he and I go way back as well. He's a fantastic producer, recording artist. He just released an album that's a tribute to Buddy Miles. There's a name you don't
Oh,
hear much anymore.
yeah.
So, but he's a fantastic drummer. And our keyboardist is Donald Robinson. And Donald and I have a history of playing in a lot of rival bands growing up in Philadelphia because back in the 70s, that was a time when every neighborhood had 2 or 3 bands and there would be battles of the bands.
Right.
And Donald's band was one of the best in the city. So he went on to, study flute and study keyboards. And then he and I reconnected when he worked with Grover Washington Jr. because he also toured with him
Ah,
and
okay.
produced records for him and produced people like Phil Perry and Rochelle Farrell and
Yeah.
Vanessa Williams. The list goes on and on.
Yeah.
So these are all folks who are really my friends and people that with whom I've collaborated with over the years.
Wow, that is great. Wonderful band performing with you, and of course, Carol Riddick on special guest on vocals. Gerald Veasley will be performing again on November 30th at Crazy Uncle Mike's at 6450 North Federal Highway in Boca Raton. Again, two shows, 5:30 and 8 p.m. And you can go to crazyunclemikes.com to learn more and get squared away with tickets and all that. Now, this is a special show for you. This isn't part of a built-in tour. This is just a sort of a one-off in a way, right?
It is. We're coming expressly to visit with the folks there,
Great.
And we're excited about it. Yeah, we'll play music from my body of work. We'll feature Carl Cox on a couple of his hits, and it'll be an exciting night of music. I don't get to Florida enough, so that's another reason why I'm super excited.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully the weather will be cooperative. Usually this time of the year, it's very, very nice and a nice escape from the cold in the Northeast. So hopefully we'll deliver for you.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
And hopefully I won't decide to I won't decide to miss my flight home and stay in this more warm weather.
Yeah. Are you going to get a day or two in of relaxation as well, or is it a quick turnaround for you?
It's a quick turnaround. We have some other shows that we have to do back here. I've been curating music at a jazz club here for the last 10 years.
Oh.
And by curating, I mean that my wife and I have a series called the Unscripted Jazz Series, and we book artists to come and perform with my band. And we've done something like 750 nights of music over the last 10 years, and bringing in folks like David Benoit and Kirk Whalum and late great Nick Coleone. The list goes on and on of artists that we've just had perform with us. And so December, the work continues. So we'll come back and do some shows there with wonderful saxophonist Jasmine Gent. But yeah, so I get a chance to tour and come down to Florida, but I get a chance also to work on this residency that was only supposed to be a 3-month residency, and it ended up being 10 years.
Kind of held over a little bit, right? As they used to say it in the business. The show's been held over.
Exactly.
10 years, a long run.
It's a nice run. We have folks that visit from all over the country to come because it's like Crazy Uncle Mike's. It's a destination.
Great. No, that's terrific. I'm hoping here that what I'm about to say is accurate, because I seem to recall, and sometimes things, they run into each other and you kind of conflate things. Did you do some kind of a special show? It was it was a video with Chick Corea, and I think you surprised him he was surprised how well you knew his music. Do you remember that, or am I conflating that with something?
That's really interesting. So Tom Emmy, a producer who created something called Studio Jams.
Yeah.
Studio Jams ran on BET Jazz for a number of years, and people could still probably find it on YouTube or do a Google search. And he would bring together different musicians to just play impromptu. And then the audience would get to see not only the finished product of whatever these musicians play, but would also get a chance to see the process of how folks decide on forms and melodies and so on.
Right.
So, but he had this other project that was called Music Lab. I think that's what it's called. And the idea there was that I would be the host, and I would interview, just like you're interviewing me, musician to musician, because you have a different way your questions are insightful in another way, that I then would be able to interview folks like Chick Corea. And so we did, I don't know how many we shot, maybe 13 or 14 different ones, but there were people like Joe Sample was one of our subjects.
Yeah.
So I got to interview Joe Bonamassa.
Yeah.
All different folks. But one of the highlights, of course, was Chick Corea. And by that time, we had decided it'll be fun to ask the artists, could I also play with them?
Yeah.
Instead of just interviewing. And that was, of course, exciting for me. And I was amazed that Chick was willing to do it, because he didn't know me. or anything. And so what song did he call? He called Spain. Now, Tom, as a musician, you know that that's just one of the songs you have to learn,
Yeah,
right? And it's a
yeah.
fun song. And so when we finished playing it, he turned to me, he said, "Wow, you really did your homework."
Yeah, very nice.
That was very good, man.
On a
You
more
came prepared.
well,
And I was thinking, you have no idea.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just part of the dictionary for us as musicians.
Yeah. Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah, I came about knowing about that video or seeing it through a friend who is a director, a
Mm.
film director in town in Philadelphia, who's gone on to do a lot of different things. And he was, I think, part of the crew on that
Ah.
particular. And he said, "Hey, you're a huge Chick Corea fan, right?" I said, "The biggest." he said, I'm going to send this to you. I want you to see this. It's with a guy named Gerald Veasley. I said, I know Gerald. I know who Gerald Veasley is. So it was one of those things. But I had to think when I was starting to ask the question, it's like, oh my God, I didn't screw this up. It was somebody else. No, it was Gerald, right? So I had to, it's been a lot of years since I've seen that, a long time, a good 20 years, I think, since I've seen that.
Yeah, that was
I
fun. And
want to
Chip,
make sure I was remembering things properly.
what an incredible musician, and just someone who contributed so much to the history of jazz. And of course, I work with Joe Zawinul, who was, in this, we think of him in the same way. So
Yeah.
someone who has worked with Weather Report and his earlier work with Miles and
Cannonball.
Cannonball Adderley.
Yeah.
I mean, he contributed so much, and I got to tour with him and record with him for almost 8 years. And it was like going to music school, but
Yeah,
not in the,
I certainly wanted to ask you about that period because
yeah,
as a keyboardist, another huge hero. For me, it was like I don't know. I always say the big five or something. It was like Chick, Herbie, Joe, George Duke, Jan Hammer. I mean, all these guys. It's like all these guys I just absolutely gravitated towards, and Joe was way up on that list. A marvelous musician
yeah,
and a unique personality with a really unbelievable life background prior to coming to the United States,
yeah,
which I think in some ways informed a lot of his music. He shared stories with me over the years about his growing up during the war and all that. And it was just an extraordinary human being, right? I know you got to obviously know him on a much, much richer, deeper level.
Well, extraordinary human being is a good way to characterize him because he had this, we use the word warmth. He had a warmth that if you weren't if you weren't close to him, you wouldn't recognize. You would think of this gruff,
Yeah.
very rigid, stern person. That wasn't him at all. He was very fun-loving, um, kind in his own way, generous, just an unbelievable person. But I think what he went through as a child, growing up during World War II, and really seeing devastation up close. It had to have an influence on him, but
For those
mostly
folks who might
positive.
not know, Joe Zawinul grew up he was Austrian, so he grew up in the middle of the war in Europe.
That's right. He grew up in
For folks who may not know that background.
yeah, thanks for reminding folks of that. So,
Yeah.
and actually 2 years ago got to visit his childhood home for the first time. I saw where he grew up. There's a park there named after him. There's a school now there in his honor, a music school. But yeah, he grew up in the most, horrific kind of circumstances where his village was bombed every day, and kids would go and sift through the rubble and trying to pull out people. He was one of those kids. Um, but I think what it did for him is it gave him a tremendous amount of grit. So things that a typical person might complain about, he would shrug it off. And he was tough. And we would, as band members, we would have a running joke about Joe's toughness, because I call it's good to be. It's good to be. Because no matter what the circumstances, his response would be, it's good to be. If we said, oh man, I'm tired, Joe would say, it's good to be tired, because that means you're working hard.
Yeah.
Or if you said, oh man, if Joe said, how are you feeling today? He said, I have a cold. It's good to have a cold. That way, when you're sneezing, you're getting all these impurities out of your body. So I think there was a stoicism that he embraced, and not in a kind of a new agey or fluff way of thinking about someone being just emotionally unattached.
It was street level.
Yeah, someone who was not afraid of life and was fearless. And so that attitude also carried to the bandstand, right? And that daring aspect of his musicianship and his ability to be a fearless band leader. The other thing that folks may not know is that he was a genius, but when I say genius, not in a way, not as a throwaway term, as somebody who's really talented, but no, literally a musical genius, who's someone who his imagination was beyond what we could think, and his ability to hear music. We talk about perfect pitch. It was perfect pitch on steroids. He could. I saw him in orchestral performances hear a single wrong note from a trombonist of an 80-piece orchestra. I mean, just fantastic. And also, the last thing I'll say about him is that he had a tremendous work ethic. So we would rehearse. Our rehearsals would be like 8 hours. We rehearsed maybe 5-6 days before going on tour, which maybe in a pop or rock framework is not much, but in the jazz world, that's a lot of rehearsing.
A lot. That's a
and
lot. Yeah.
Before we would get there, he will have already been practicing for a solid hour.
Right.
And then after rehearsal, he would typically swim for an hour and then practice and write for another hour or two. So he was just
and I know boxing was a big part of his life, and we can mention the swimming, and I know that he loved to hit the heavy bag and the speed bag, and I seen a video some years back where he's working with a trainer, and he said, this guy is tougher than any 70-year-old I know. He was something else. I miss him. I absolutely loved him. And, I can remember a few times that I interviewed him, I called the house, and sometimes his lovely wife, Maxine, would answer. And I said, hi, how are you, Maxine? Good. Is Joe available? He's in the studio right now, but he'll call you back in 2 hours. And boy, you could set your watch. He would call back in 2 hours. And, it was like he just a rock solid, you know what I mean? Dependable. Whatever. I just marvel at people that are like that, and just have done so much in their lives. Our guest is Gerald Veasley. Speaking of somebody who's done an awful lot, Gerald Veasley has done an awful lot, and he's going to be coming to South Florida with Carol Riddick on vocals and his wonderful backing band on November 30th at, again, Crazy Uncle Mike's in Boca Raton. Of course, we've talked a lot about all the wonderful musicians Gerald has performed with over many decades, but he's also enjoyed a tremendous solo career. And as I mentioned earlier, I got hip to him originally with the Zawinul Syndicate, but then his albums, and in fact, we even kicked off the show with a tune from one of those albums, and the song is called Alegria. Is that how you say that? Alegria?
Yes,
It means joy, right?
means joy, yes, in Spanish.
Yes, and so it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of music, and that sort of, I know it was one of your earliest recordings, and you've done a ton since. What is the process for you in terms of kind of putting an album together? Are you do you sit down and do a lot of writing first, or by yourself, or are the tunes sometimes the product of sort of jam sessions, or is a combination, or what's the process for you?
So it varies. It's the one of the albums that I'm most proud of is called Velvet. And the process for creating Velvet was me singing into a device and singing the melodies, the bass lines, the drum parts, and then transcribing them and making that the bones of a song. And sometimes bringing in a collaborator to bring in their ideas as well. Chris Farr, saxophone player who worked with me for many years, he was involved in that record. But what I was trying to do was figure out the most natural way to create some music.
Yeah.
Because often as musicians, if we're trained on a specific instrument, that becomes our way of writing.
Yeah.
But with that instrument comes possibilities, but also sometimes comes habits or barriers.
Yeah.
Whereas if you think about, and I often when I'm writing music, I'm most interested in melody. That's what excites me the most. And then harmony. And lower in the list is the bass line. I don't think about the bass line as much. So singing, not that I'm a great singer, but singing melodies really became an interesting way to develop that particular album.
Yeah.
And then I've had other projects where it was more of a collaborative process, getting folks in a room. There was one album that I haven't released yet, we call the Purple House Session, because a dear friend of mine who was managing me at that time had a vacation home or a second home down in Virginia in the country where nobody's cell phones would work. There was the best well water, and it's his son and my engineer at the time put together a recording studio in the garage there, and we just locked ourselves in there for a week. And in preparation for that, I wrote a song a day. My idea was to come into that project with 30 songs. So when I say songs, they were just sketches of ideas, things that I wrote, and to see what would develop if I brought it in front of a band, how we could jointly create something out of these sketches. And it was an interesting process. I thought out of the 30, there were probably 22 pieces that sounded, interesting. And so I've done it a number of different ways. And I think for me, the least satisfying way to do music is the technological, using the technological resources. I can't even imagine using AI, but I know that some folks find that now as a tool to create music, because I like the organic aspect of creating music.
we're in the sort of same demographic age-wise, and it's like we heard guys like Miles and all these guys that sort of like just let the live thing happen, and because it's probably in a lot of ways the most authentic expression because it's in real time and you're interacting with other musicians and it's not predetermined, right? It's kind of, and so it's kind of hard to unlearn that maybe, and want to embrace something that's more manufactured. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I think that is sort of the spirit in which I think we both embrace that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely that it's a question of it's a generational shift, and it's been happening gradually over time anyway, right? With other tools, other technological tools. But I would say that now we're at a precipice that's a little different because if we allow the product to be the only important thing and not the process, we're giving away our humanity, right? So we've been looking at the product for the longest time, and even calling music product, right? That's how the music business did.
Yeah.
As musicians, we would talk about albums, and then in the business meetings, they're talking about product. So that's more than just semantics. There's been a gradual shift about how we treat the music. And so if you become product oriented, then the process becomes whichever one is most efficient.
True.
Right?
True.
And so the efficiency, Henry Ford came with a very efficient process for creating the automobile.
Yeah.
Right? And music does have a commercial aspect of it too. I've written and recorded commercial music, but I would encourage us all to not give up on our humanity, because the process is also beautiful. Like when you put your hands on the keyboards, the very act of what you're doing to create sound is beautiful, and it's enriching for you and it's enriching for us.
I couldn't agree more or put it more beautifully. That's it. That is it. So before we let you go, and believe me, we'd love to have you back and talk more because this has been great. And I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
What's next? I mean, I know obviously you're doing some shows and you're continuing with the 10-year experiment, which is fantastic. But what you got an album in the works, or you're working?
I do. It's funny that we're talking about albums and specifically live albums. So Carol Riddick and I, we have a project we've been working on that is a tribute to Nina Simone. We call it I Got Life. And it's a fascinating project because it touches on different aspects of her work, social justice songs of love, some of the songs where she seems to be searching thematically. And we've done two albums already. We did a live album, so that we intend to release in January. And we also did a studio recording with several musicians, including some of the folks that I've named.
Yeah.
But a lot of this work, the center of it is Aaron Graves, who's a wonderful pianist and keyboardist who worked with little Jimmy Scott and others. So that's my passion project right now. And again, we'll release the live project in January. And I have a whole other life here in Philadelphia as an arts leader. I lead an organization called Jazz Philadelphia, which is an organization that provides information and resources to musicians, specifically jazz musicians. We do an annual conference called the Jazz Philadelphia Summit, where we bring in a lot of thought leaders, musicians, business folks to talk about the latest and greatest ideas. And And we also have an ongoing program called the Core Cooperative, which trains musicians to be more entrepreneurial and to think about how to be leaders in their community and curators of music. And then the other thing that I've taken on in terms of a nonprofit role is I'm currently the chair of the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance, which is a consortium of 400 plus organizations of all disciplines. And so those are things that I'm involved in that allow me to give back and to work with folks who are also trying to solve some of these issues around making sure that artists can thrive in today's world.
Wow. Well, that's wonderful. And thank you for that. As a musician myself, and I know that a lot of musicians watch this and listen to this podcast, and I'm sure their level of appreciation is also very strong for everything you're doing. It's great, and it's an inspiration, honestly. I can really say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gerald Veasley, our guest today, very special guest today on the FusionShare podcast. And again, for folks in South Florida or planning on a little R&R in South Florida, November 30th is the date. Gerald Veasley and Carol Riddick on November 30th, 2 shows, 5:30 and 8 p.m. at Crazy Uncle Mike's, located at 6450. That's 6450 North Federal Highway in Boca Raton. And if you go to crazyunclemikes.com, there you go. That's where you can learn more, get your tickets, get squared away for admission to one or both of these shows. Why not? Stay, come for the music, stay for the love. That's it. 5:30 and 8 o'clock at Crazy Uncle Mike's on November 30th. Gerald, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, it's
really appreciate it. And big thanks to your lovely wife, Roxanne, for helping get this together as well. And we'd love to have you on again.
I would love to. You're doing great work here, and I'm really proud to have been a part of it. And thank you so much for the invitation. And hopefully I'll see you down there at Crazy Uncle Mike's.
Absolutely. Would love to see you and say hello, and that'd be great. Catch up in person. There he is, folks. Gerald Veasley, our guest today on the FusionShare podcast. I'm Tom Alexander. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. See you again soon. So long.